I'm A.B. Stoddard with the Hill newspaper, here for a conversation with Paul Bledsoe, who moderated the Hill's Biofuels and American Energy Policy Forum this morning, sponsored by the Smarter Fuel Future. Paul was able to speak this morning with Congressman Peter Welch of Vermont, Democrat, about the Renewable Fuels Standard. We also had invited Congressman John Shimkus of Illinois, who was instrumental in the passing of the Renewable Fuel Standard back in 2007 as a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. But Congressman Shimkus was unable to join us this morning as his markup on that committee conflicted with our event. But Paul was also able to moderate a roundtable of diverse views on the Renewable Fuel Standard, and joins us now to discuss what happened today at the forum. It was very interesting to me, Paul. There were obviously a number of different voices from different perspectives about this, and what I heard, including from the Environmental Working Group, was that there is a real coalition of strange bedfellows here coming up against corn-based ethanol. And my first question to you is, if you have people from a neutral policy perspective talking about the unintended consequences, you have environmentalists, you have the oil industry, you have the food industry, all coming together to say that this is wrong. Why don't you just start from the perspective of the consumer before we get to the politics about how wrong this might be for the consumer?
Thanks, AB. And what we heard from some of the opponents of the RFS this morning was that this is beginning to pinch on a whole variety of American consumers. The contention in particular is that it's driving up a lot of food prices other than corn.
For about 25 years, starting in 1980, food prices globally were very stable. They only fluctuated about 30% up or down from 1980 to 2005. Starting in about 2005, there was a big change in the market and prices started to rise. They doubled within just 3 years by 2008.
There's a concern that beef and chicken and milk and other prices are being artificially inflated because of the demand for corn that is going, instead of cattle and other feed, it's going to produce ethanol. And so the advocates think they have a sort of consumer base for reform here.
The environmental consequences, I think, are starting to be really a significant factor. You know, there was an interesting coalition when the ethanol mandate first came in. There was a hope that it would be good environmentally, that it would help the farm economy. And it did to some extent. Okay, it helped the farm economy, and I don't think it helped the environment.
You hear these different perspectives that say that it's not only raising prices, which is potentially leading to social unrest, but putting into production so many millions of acres of wetlands and grasslands that it's ultimately increasing greenhouse gas emissions and potentially so much harming the air that we're talking about. What leg is the ethanol industry standing on in this debate at this point?
Well, I think the corn growers still have a pretty strong base in the U.S. Senate, for example, where agricultural interests traditionally are very powerful. There's also the fact that the most important primary in presidential politics still is in Iowa, which is corn central.
What are your thoughts on the landscape, the politics of 14, the politics of 16, when there might be a moment open for reconsideration of this?
So most people who bet against action in Washington win these days. We're in a period of incredible partisan dysfunction in the U.S. Congress, where even things that enjoy large majorities in both the House and the Senate can't even get up for votes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's the case for RSF reform or not, but I think it's unlikely that we see major reform. Certainly in this Congress, there's some possibility, I suppose, of votes in the next Congress, but then we're in a presidential cycle and Iowa rears its head again.
The politics of it at the presidential level, obviously, you show up in Iowa and you take the pledge, right?
I think it's an uphill battle, but I think in the long term, a re-examination of the policy is probably likely.
Right. Well, we'll be watching.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks.
Appreciate your work
today. Good to see you again.